Frankly speaking, I wasn't even planning to make this comparison video because for me these two devices are from absolutely different worlds. But then again, recently I kept receiving like a lot of messages from my students asking what should I buy in 2025. I kinda understand that both of these devices play on the same playground, however in different corners. So in this video let's discuss all the bullet points where they are similar, where they are different, and by the end of the video you yourself will decide what device to buy for yourself in 2025, so to say. Of course the SP screen is a bit bigger, and when you operate with samples, you can see a bit more information. But when it comes to samples and sample editing on the Move, you can still see everything pretty clear, and you can do the same things, everything is visible. The smaller screen is not such a big deal. Sometimes I'm annoyed by the encoders on the SP404 because they have this famous workflow. They are stopped on the left and they are stopped on the right, so they are limited encoders. And for example, if you adjust some settings, for example, volume or pitch or something, you say it's going to be 28 or something, 86, and then on the next sample, if you move it, the settings will change a little bit, and you would have to look for the settings again, which sometimes can be time-consuming and annoying, especially if you operate with like 3 or 4 or more samples at the same time. But I understand that this is the legacy of all SP devices, and the limited encoders to the left and to the right is the workflow and how SPs operate. I guess even in the future when they release the SP404 Mark III or something, I think they would still have these limited encoders. While on the Move, the encoders are free to rotate in any direction, so it's more of a push-through workflow, and when you go from one sample to the second sample to the third sample, you don't need to adjust and catch the previous setting on the sample or the sound. It's just easier in the everyday workflow when you adjust multiple parameters at the same time. Although there is one advantage towards the Move because it has the built-in battery and the built-in little speaker. I understand that this is not a soundbar quality on the Live 2, for example, but we're not comparing those two today. It has some sound, and let me play you something. It gives you some representation of what is happening, and if you are sampling on the go, if you are somewhere traveling, you have like the small quick reference to what you are doing. And on the Move there is little tiny microphone right here, but the quality of it leaves much better to be desired. When I sample something onto the internal microphone of Move, there is a lot of hiss sound there. Like, I understand it's really tiny, but the quality, I mean, my iPhone was always with me, so I sample something to here, and then I transfer my recorded file into the Move and start working with this recorded sound. But anyway, there is a microphone and it's alright. The next point is ecosystem, and with SP404 Mark II, it's quite simple. There is basically no ecosystem, it's just the standalone sampler without any continuation. Yes, of course, there is some SP404 app on your computer, but it doesn't do basically anything, it just exists. While Ableton Move is just part of a big family, come on guys, there is Ableton in the name of it. You begin your ideas, your sketches right here with your hands-on experience, you attach it to your computer and you continue with the same project on the Ableton Live, or you can use even the Ableton Cloud to transfer it wirelessly, which is again very cool. Although with the SP I don't really see any difference, because once you finish your projects you just stem out all your WAV files and you can use the same Ableton Live on your computer again. But the fact that Move is part of the Ableton family, it really fills in the air, because there are drum racks, there are controls that you're already familiar with, so the process of getting into the device is much quicker, I guess. The next thing is the price point, because both devices are in the same price range. SP is a bit cheaper, I guess, around 300 something, 400. Ableton Move is about $450, again depending on the shop, country, and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, the price is quite similar. We don't compare it to Push 3, which is 2 times more expensive, and Push 3 standalone even more times more expensive. MPC is much more expensive if it's Live 2, for example, that I have. No, these devices are in the same price category, and it's alright. It's just price is out of the question. It's just the workflow that you should choose. And before workflow differences, I would say that there are big differences in terms of connectivity, because in my opinion, SP is the winner right here. It has the full-size TRS jacks, which don't require any adapters and any gimmicks. Yes, the body is a bit thicker, but then again, it's not a big deal. It's basically the same form factor. It's just more convenient to use the real deal cables, the TRS cables that you have everywhere on the studio. You can attach your outboard samplers. You can attach your vinyl record player through the TRS, while the Move, for some reason, has only 3.5mm jacks millimeter ports. And if we look at the Push 3, which is not that bigger and not that thicker, I would definitely prefer to have a bit thicker Move, however that it would have the TRS ports on the back. It would be much more convenient. And then again, you can use both instruments as an external audio interface for your computer. For example, right now I'm using a MacBook Pro and I easily attach my SP404 via the Type-C cable to my MacBook, and sometimes it works as a secondary audio interface to my primary Apollo Twin, because Apollo Twin has only 2 inputs, and if I attach this Roland as a secondary device, I combine them together, make the aggregate device, and boom, I have 4 inputs in my computer. And I can use the Move as the audio interface as well using the same Type-C cable. However, it's less convenient. For example, if it's the only device that you have in your studio, but you have like real monitors, how would you attach the monitors to this audio interface? You would have to buy some dongle that has 3.5mm on one end and splits into 2 big things and attach it to them, so it's just less convenient. However, I understand that the engineers of the Move were fighting for very compact body to have everything at one place, and I think they achieved it with some sacrifice, but anyway, it's here. The next point that I'd like to discuss is the amount of tracks in each devices, and I'll start with Ableton first, because this point appeared because of Ableton. On Ableton there are only 4 tracks, or 4 tracks, I don't know how to put it, but on the internet a lot of people are screaming and shouting about the limitation of 4 tracks only, and according to the statement of the official representative of Ableton company, they are not even planning to expand the limitation of 4 tracks in the future, because as they say, like it's connected with CPU and to give the best experience, blah blah blah, we cannot, and we are not, and you should not expect to have more tracks in the future ever. So there are 4 tracks only, and you should be extremely creative, use this creative limitation, export this synth as a WAV file and add it to the first drum rack of the drums. However, on the SP there are no tracks whatsoever. Every bank right here, every pad is sort of a track itself. So for example, you can go to Shift Project, you have 16 slots for projects, and you go, for example, in my case, to Project 8, and in this Project 8 folder, so to say, you can have multiple projects. On bank A you have drums and bass, on bank B you have the melodic sample, and A and B together is one track, one project. You go to Pattern Select and make on bank A like one project. Then bank C, again, it's drums, some different drums, different bass, bank D, different melodic sample, and so on and so forth. Boom, it's next project. And remember that the SP has disk streaming from the SD card, which is very helpful because you can load it with extremely heavy and long sounds, 5-minute WAV file onto each pad. CPU here can be the limiting factor, although it doesn't position itself as the live device for some live events, playing at the clubs, blah blah blah. It's more for the production. Let's discuss synthesizers, and here with the SP404 Mark II everything is quite simple, because the short answer is there are no built-in synthesizers in SP404 Mark II. However, there is something that appeared recently which is called bass generator. You press Shift, Record Settings, and there you have it. This is bass synthesizer. You can set different types. Usually I prefer the sine wave, which is the basic sub-bass. And for example, it's quite handy when you work with your track. You have the beats, you have the melodic sample, and then you just need to write bass. And of course, you can go into your library, find some bass, and play it in chromatic mode. However, you can just go Shift, Record Settings. There is a bass generator, and the bass is always ready for you. You can just add it to your track. You can resample it using the 404 simulator or something like that, and you can create a more interesting sound bass. However, the situation is absolutely different when it comes to the Ableton Move device. This is a groove box in the first place, not a sampler, and if you treat it as a groove box, everything becomes more obvious that it's built as a groove box, and the workflow is such. You can load synthesizers on each track, so it can be 4 of them. However, let me show you. I have a project right here that I was recently working on, and it has, on the first track, it has the decap basic preset of drum kit. Here is the 808 bass, built-in synthesizer. Here is another built-in synthesizer, which is drift. Alright, and here is what? Wavetable. So 3 synthesizers, 1 drum rack, and listen closely. If you think there is some delay in the sound, you're quite right. Let me put the microphone right here and listen to when I press the pad and when the sound comes after. So it's quite difficult to play because there is an obvious delay, and it would make impossible to play at live event because there is definitely some CPU problem happening right here. However, I really like that Ableton Move offers 3 synthesizers. For example, it can be a wavetable, it can be a drift, sample-based synthesizer like this. And for example, if we choose something here, there are a few settings that you can adjust, like a filter, resonator, attack, oscillator, and so on and so forth. So you can't really dive deep into the sound creation. However, it gives you some Kickstarter ideas, and you can work later on your computer in Ableton Live. But however, just as soon as you load a new project, like let me go into a new blank project right here, it already loads some random presets, which is so cool. And it gives you the idea that you can start with, like instant inspiration. And by the way, I remind you that I have a special educational course if you want to learn and master the workflow of the SP404 Mark II, where in each video lesson we will go step by step from zero to making a full track. There is a link for you in the description. And oh boy, we need to talk about sampling workflow right now. Like, this is the biggest difference between these two devices. And as I already said, the SP404 Mark II is a real honest sampler. It's based on sampling. It was born out of sampling legacy, so it's just a sampler. In a good way, of course. However, Ableton Move is not a sampler, as I call it. It's a groove box that has sampling capabilities. In my opinion, it's absolutely different things. And the whole sampling workflow shows us that it wasn't built as a sampler in the first place. Let's start with SP404 Mark II. I have these drums right here, and alright, there is like start end function. We can select the start point, select the end point, we can zoom in, zoom out, everything is pretty straightforward. We can go into shift, chop mode. I already have something chop, I will delete all markers, and we can do the easiest thing, which is lazy chop. So the SP has the limitation of only 16 slices, and maybe in some future updates, I really hope that they extend this limitation to 32, at least 32 slices. It would be extremely perfect. But it's a lazy chopping, typical that we do every day on our MPC or something. Then we can zoom in, because of course I wasn't perfect. We can adjust. We can zoom in closer. We can use the very cool zero cross snap point to have minimal pops and clicks. And for you guys who sample every day, I'm doing right now something extremely dull and boring and simple. Well, yes, I wanted to show you how the SP operates and how Ableton is different from this. Or if you don't want to use the lazy chop, you can go to menu, automark, and automark. If, for example, it's a sample from Splice, it's a perfect loop, you know, the BPM and so on and so forth. You can decide, for example, to chop it by transients or by time division. Again, only 16 slices are possible. For example, at the end there is something. I can go to start endpoint and do it like this. Even we can use an envelope and use a release function, for example, the classic release. For example, I don't like this tail. And this is like a very, very typical workflow with samples. You have already guessed that there is some however with Ableton Move. It was built as a groove box, so when you work with samples, with chopping, you do it like this. I have the same drum break. So the quick answer is there is no lazy chopping on Ableton Move, and a lot of people in the comments might write, no, yes, there is actually lazy chopping. Let me show you how it works, and then we will decide if there is no lazy chopping function on Ableton Move and how easily this function operates. So first of all, we actually need to record it onto our pattern. Alright, for example, we go to recording right here. Decide if it's microphone or resampling. like this, for example. So technically speaking, yes, it's lazy chopping. However, first of all, you need to record this into your pattern. If you already have bass sound, if you have some synthesizer and some melody, you would have to mute them and solo only the drums and resample only the drums while doing this lazy chopping, which is counterintuitive if you think of the SP workflow, because here it's so much simple. However, I like the fact that after this lazy chopping, there is the ability to adjust the settings, so it's, so to say, non-destructive slices, and so on and so forth. However, it's quite inconvenient, and in order to be a king using Ableton Move, I would say adapt to the rules of the game and actually do it this way. So, for example, we want to do the same thing, kick, hat, and snare. And there is no end adjustment, it's only made through hold. So for example, I'm satisfied with how the kick sounds. I copy it to second pad. I double press shift, because if it's without shift, it's too coarse settings. I need to fine tune it. So I'm looking for the snare. For example, it's here. And again, the settings of the hold, I'm listening as if I'm cracking the safe. Too little. Maybe just enough. Copy this onto this pad. Looking for the hat. Too much. And here we have it. So it's up to you to decide whether it's a better or worse workflow. However, I would say it's a more unusual workflow in terms of sampling features, sampling capabilities. I really hope that in the nearest update, instead of this hold feature, hold workaround, they actually give us something like a start point, end point to actually see the sample where the waveform begins and ends. It would be much better. But frankly speaking, I don't really hope that it's coming in the nearest future, because they are focused on the groove box. They are not focused on the sampling capabilities. And I'm not done yet. There are fantastic 32 pads right here. However, the limitation to drum racks is only 16 pads. Why not using something like this? I can select and deselect the secondary set of pads, which for now can be used only as the 16 pitch. Well, I guess kind of in the future they would make the 16 velocity, but I would really hope to have 32 slices, and if they add 32 slices to drum rack to slice your sample not into 16 but 32 slices, that would be definitely a feature that would rival the SP404 Mark II. Like the SP would have to think of some shift, go into another bank, and here you have all your pads, all your 32 pads right here in front of you. Why not just use them as the next row of sampling slices? Such a big missed opportunity for now. And one more thing about samples. What I really like on the SP when it comes to different slices, it's actually time stretching the slices. You can time stretch the samples on the SP just you would do on Ableton, on MPC, on everything. And I already anticipate how people are commenting like, yes, you can also time stretch samples on the Move. Wait a second. Like, for example, I have this, maybe even like -1. On the SP, I can select the ensemble mode to have this warping algorithm, and I can make it slower. I can make it faster. So I'm operating both ways. I can make the sample slower, I can make it faster, depending on how I want to implement it in my project. However, I have, for example, this sample right here, and yes, there is like stretch effect. I can apply the effect. I can work with grain size, for example. The second sample I'm going to stretch as well, the third and the fourth. So yes, it's stretched, it's warped. However, what if I want to make it shorter, because right now it's longer, and it's not possible because I cannot go beyond 1. 1 is like 0. So I can make them longer, but I can't make them shorter. Why? Because so many times in my projects I warp samples longer, shorter, whatever, just however I feel when the beat is playing. Right here we don't have this option. And I understand why, because if you look into the Ableton Live on your computer, if you look into what is under the hood on Ableton Move, every drum rack has not a built-in sampler, but this drum sampler, which is like, it doesn't have a lot of features, it's just extremely basic. And again, this this is like a very missed opportunity, because the SP404, which doesn't have the CPU, so to say, which is very straightforward and simple, it can stretch it faster, it can stretch it longer. And this device, which is like 10 times smarter in terms of the CPU capabilities, it can't do it shorter, faster. Again, why? Because it's not a sampler, it's a groove box. However, this is not the only video if you want to learn more about the workflow of SP or Ableton Move. There are a couple videos right here where you can learn more tips and tricks for sampling, for example. Just go and watch them.